Hi everyone. This panel is about disruption and sustainability, and we were thinking that we need to talk about things like that nowadays. There is a lot of disruption happening in libraries, disruption in collections, in who we are managed by, or who we hire, and actually, this talk came from a conversation between Brad, Warren, and me just a year ago in an Access Services conference when we were talking about how we hire people nowadays. And it felt as if we don't know enough about each other's practices and decision-making around hiring. So because we talked about it, we were like, okay, but we do have now new people that we hire. They come with new tools, with new expectations about the workplace, and maybe we should just, have people, smart people together to talk about the way that they are handling it in one forum. So I want to thank, the courage around the table already, because talking about this topic is obviously not always easy, and if you are a disruptor in your own libraries, it's great. So we want to kind of come up with good ideas on how to continue and sustain, the workforce and the good ideas that we have in our own libraries. So we'd like to have a dialogue. So as we go around, just kind of think about questions you have. We're going to have around half an hour for the panelists to talk about the questions we thought of, and then around 15-20 minutes to discuss things with you. So Brad is also responsible for those nice slides, so thank you.
You're welcome.
But the panelists are really cool, and maybe you can say who you are, if you don't mind, just quickly. We'll test this mic.
Hello, my name is Peter Bae. I'm the Assistant University Librarian for the Scholarly Collection Services at the Princeton University Library.
Brad Warren, Associate Dean of Library Services at the University of Cincinnati.
Nina Servizi, Associate Dean for Knowledge Access and Resource Management Services, New York University Libraries.
And Jesse Kennecke, Director of Acquisitions and E-Resource Licensing Services, Cornell University.
And I'm Boaz Nadav Manes. I'm the Associate University Librarian at Brown University for Access Services and Collection Management. So the first question we have for the panelists is, and I need glasses for that. How successful have you been in recruiting or successfully hiring someone from outside the library? So maybe we'll kind of start with you, Peter, and then go with the rest.
Okay, so for the first question, I should say I wasn't so successful, even though I tried once. And my job is now overseeing the access service and acquisition. I'm originally from the resource sharing community, so I am the interlibrary librarian, and acquisition was totally new to me. But then when I was assumed this role in acquisitions, I tried to hire somebody from outside the library, especially somebody who my intention was hiring somebody from the publishing or vendor side, so that we can have really someone who know how to deal with the vendors and publishers. Especially if you have someone like acquisition, having that kind of person was very useful. I know that many librarian colleagues go to the publishing or vendor side, so why not somebody we can get from there? And so because of that, when I posted the job description and search posting, we intentionally said, for example, the experience, not only the ILS experience, but also maybe some experience handling with the inventory system or vendor business softwares. So we found good candidates, but in the end, I said it was not successful because I believe we cannot pay enough the money that they will get from the other sectors. So that was my story.
My experience was from hiring for a merged position in which the person was responsible for two very distinct different kinds of services. And in this case, I also felt what I was looking for was to look for somebody who didn't look like us. And whether or not they were necessarily another librarian or from outside, I actually was very open-ended about what that could look like. Or sort of the flavor of librarian that they might be if they did come from outside. The way that I tried to prepare in this case is that we work on a search committee that makes recommendations ultimately to the hiring manager, which was me, who would then make the final decision. Appreciated having that power in that role. And really what I did was to spend a lot of time with the search committee at the beginning to frame what it was that we were looking for and what was important. And in this case, I was looking mostly for soft skills and leadership potential rather than whether they actually had the exact skill set necessary for doing the job, whether they had the expertise. I actually said that was secondary. I don't think I really felt that way, but I was really trying to stress for them to view the candidate pool in a way that I think was very different than how we would normally go about hiring somebody who had to head up something like resource sharing, which does require a pretty significant hard skill set, or something that was much more open-ended as curricular support. I felt that they did a good job because in the end, when we were screening, we screened a public librarian, somebody from a special library, somebody from a for-profit situation, working for an architecture firm, somebody who was in a seminary library, and somebody who was from a small public library, and then a small academic library. And at the time I was working at an Ivy, and we didn't have a single person we screened who was an Ivy, which I have to admit made me really happy, or a person who came from a large ARL library. And this wasn't a case in my mind of a failure on our part of not having recruited correctly, but that I had set the expectations for the search committee for us to really look for a very different kind of thing when we were doing the screening. In the end, we did end up hiring a librarian, but they came from a small private institution, so they did understand that aspect of working in a private school, but they came from another universe, to be quite honest, compared to everybody else within my organization, and certainly they were very different from the people who they would be interacting with on a consortial basis. In this case, I felt that it was very successful. They're still working there, and I think that they're having a modest amount of success, if not a lot. And but the framing in my mind really had to do with setting the expectation in the hiring process of what you were looking for and really committing to that when you said that that's what you wanted.
I also had quite a bit of success. I was hiring a head of a new department that would be technologists, and this department is within the technical services area of the NYU libraries. It's not a part of the library IT, so it's a very different type of culture in technical services. We had a search committee come together. They were very skeptical about bringing in someone. We knew we needed someone with skills in systems and data architecture, and they wanted that person to also have experience with the library, and try as I might, the search committee insisted on this experience with libraries. We went through a round of interviews, on-campus interviews as well. We did not like the candidates. They weren't a good fit, but the good thing about that in declaring a failed search was that the search committee was much more open the second round to get rid of the library experience. And so the second round yielded a very, very good candidate, and we made an excellent hire.
And I've got sort of two examples I want to highlight. One of a specific hire where in our job posting we actually tried to do that, de-emphasize the need of direct library experience or an MLS or anything like that. They were kind of moved almost to the preferred or optional qualifications area. But really driving home and the idea of somebody that's kind of willing to get into some adventures, frankly. And in this case, we ended up hiring someone who was a librarian, but had also founded several library services companies in their career. And lucky for us, happened to be living in the area and wanted to start working again at a library. But then the other example I actually want to hit home on is the concept of getting outside the librarian industry in a way. So looking at the staff we actually already have that are willing to speak up when things aren't working right, willing to sort of disrupt processes we've been doing, willing to tackle sort of new directions that we want to take, and really trying to make a path for them to get promoted so they can get some better pay, whether that's into a librarian line or whether that's into just work that interests them, that we can kind of really focus their skill set and that drive to sort of change the way we do things. And that's a thing we've been trying to do at Cornell University for a long time, and I think we've made some really good successes there. And comes at a cost of sometimes having them disrupt my own day, perhaps.
So, thank you. Question 2. What training issues have you dealt with or anticipate from bringing in the disruptive hire? Let's do the other way.
So yeah, training issues. So the MLS comes with certain expectations. That's often why we feel the need to stick it in a job description. Whether we really get those expectations or not is debatable. But when we're looking to hire people that aren't, but to work in our library on something that don't come with that MLS because we're looking in another direction, it is important to sort of look at what does an MLS bring to the table that we may want to make sure this person's got, or cover those things, or is that the whole point of not looking for someone with an MLS, that we kind of want to break that mold? But things like MARC and other library-centric concepts, does this person need to know something about that? Or can they get in there and disrupt better by, frankly, not knowing what the heck MARC is? But it's one experience we had at Cornell a while back, and this was one of the first times I was directly involved in the hiring of essentially someone outside the library industry. We were hiring a bioinformatics librarian. None of us knew what bioinformatics was at the time, and we felt the better direction was to look at people kind of working in that field or studying in that field, and we ended up hiring a recent PhD candidate from Cornell who was essentially a data scientist and focusing in bioinformatics, and she really ran with that, and our plan at the hiring was to sort of put her through, like, pick a few library kinds of classes or whatever to try to have her take at the nearest information school, but she just kind of hit the ground running and really didn't need any of that and just disrupted, frankly.
Like Jesse, I think one of the biggest challenges we have is just introducing the new hires who are coming from outside of libraries to the library culture, to explain to them what it is we actually do. Also to help them understand the legacy of many of our systems. And, you know, I can remember when I made this new hire, his first question to me was, why are you using MARC? It's so dysfunctional. Shouldn't you just use another language? And of course, looking at it from a data management side, of course it's dysfunctional. We would love to be in another language, but then you can't throw away easily the legacy of MARC. And then when you start talking about the conversion of millions of records that are already in this format, it becomes very difficult. So the other thing is helping someone understand certain biases that librarians have, that if they're coming from the outside world, particularly if they're coming for a for-profit world, it can be a very disorienting environment to be at a nonprofit university.
So I've thought about this quite a bit, both of it in the context of where I was and then Cincinnati. I've been in this position now for 3 months, and I'm about to introduce a disruptive hire, which is kind of fun. We're bringing them on next week, and we're throwing away old processes and having fun. And this is being recorded. Okay. So I'll speak about the past, but things that I have thought about and anticipated. I would say for you, if you're considering to bring in somebody who doesn't look like you. Culture, I completely agree, is something that takes a lot of thought. But you really do need to think about the time commitment that you as the hiring manager or whomever is going to be the hiring manager will get with this. They will cost more from a time point of view and possibly even from a very real dollar point of view to onboard and to train. And for them to understand the culture and that with which they're a part of, and also some of the hard skills which they're just not going to necessarily have. That'll also require a lot more personal time from the hiring supervisor for mentoring, and you have to be prepared that they will possibly hate the job since they are so at odds with the rest of the organization. And having to deal with that, that will happen a lot earlier. As a person who's now in the magical 3-month mark where you realize, you know, oh my God, what was I thinking? They may feel that way in the first week. And I think you have to be prepared for dealing with both the pros and the cons of what is quite honestly sort of an emotional roller coaster that this new hire will have because they are so different from everyone else. So I think that it's a mix of allowing them to vent, to allowing them to learn, and for allowing them to synthesize what it is that they're discovering and learning and finding to be so different and strange without coloring too much with your own opinions. That's something that we always have to do as hiring supervisors, bringing somebody new into an organization. But in this case, I think you have to be really careful because part of what you're bringing them in from the disruptive aspect is the new ideas, the new way of looking at things, allowing them to bring that out and to not accidentally color that perspective too quickly and that they've sort of merged into the organization. In some respects, when you're doing this, what you're looking for is the opposite of fit. You're looking for something that doesn't fit. And that comes with a huge time commitment on your part for committing to that and allowing that it may not work out, and that's okay. It's not a failure on your part or theirs, but you have to keep in mind this is a person with real emotional aspects that come to this and a lot of sacrifices they may make in order to commit to this, and you really have to take that seriously and think of your own time commitment in supporting that.
So in addition to the first one, the failed search, also I have a successful hiring as well, but it's not totally from outside the library, but from different areas in the librarianship to acquisition. So in this case, I hired one person from resource sharing to acquisition because the person has a comparable skill set. But instead of focusing on training, I try to find the person and his characteristics and how this person, for example, is flexible to transfer his skill set, which was used for resource sharing, how easily he can transfer that skill set to acquisition. Also, how this person, how much is quick learner, because there are certain things you have to learn and memorize anyway, whichever job you got. So those two areas of the characteristics I focused more on. And then training was, in a way, issue for me because I was new to the job for 2 months. There's nothing I can train this person, and this person has to find a way around talking with other staff members in the unit. But since I focused on these characteristics of quick learner, flexible thinking, that was successful because this person, quickly learned and got the trust from the other members. So.
Great. Let's see if I can do this. I can. Okay, question 3. Are you ready? What cultural issues have you experienced with this kind of hire? How disruptive has this person been to your organizational culture? So we kind of answered many aspects of this, but let's focus on the culture and the way that it kind of resonated with the hire.
So am I starting?
Yep.
Okay. So again, using the same example, the unit that this person was hired, the last time we hired a new person was 2002. So you can guess how the staff compositions are. Most of people worked at least 20 or 30 years, and this person is new. So getting the trust among those old staff members who is doing things for last 20 years as they used to do. And this person is about a bit higher than other staff members, but has to navigate, first of all, learn from this person and learn the culture of acquisition, and then try to find some good ways of make them easy to do certain things using his technical skills. So that's why I, again, focus more on the personal characteristics of this person: quick learner, flexible, and easy to, how can I say, a people person who can easily talk with others. So those things are the, in a way, to make this new disruptive. In this way, I should say, this person's background was disruptive, but his characteristics were not disruptive at all. He was fitting well into the group. And then the cultural issue didn't happen as one afraid. And also this person tried to find easy, how can I say, non-aggressive way of changing what people's doing, especially make things easier for all the staff members. That immediately got the trust from the other staff members.
I would, pardon me, I would echo sort of a similar success as far as how they blended in with the culture, but once again, what we were really focusing on was the person's soft skills, leadership skills, organizational skills, communication skills. Somebody who is really good at that will find a way to blend in with a organization, I think, actually pretty quickly, because to be good at that enables you to be pretty adaptable in the first place and having sort of a high emotional intelligence. The part I found really interesting, and I was actually sort of proud of this moment, was that the first meeting this person went to with our consortium, in which they were interacting with some people, they really ruffled one particular person's feathers, and it was a joy to see it, to be quite honest, because they were fearless, and I really appreciated that that they were able to bring out sort of something that many of us had been just sort of dealing with for a while within that relationship, but because they didn't know any better, they went ahead and just sort of pointed out the obvious, and it was a delight to see. Did it change anything? Probably not, but it was sort of personally satisfying, I will admit. So I guess if you want some entertainment in meetings, I suppose that it's another reason to do it, but that's not a good reason.
I would say some of the biggest changes that we had is because we were really looking for some hard skills and to bring a group of technologists that were sort of homegrown. They were very much staff like what Jesse had mentioned, who had sort of stepped forward, taught themselves coding, and they were doing really, really beautiful work, but they needed guidance. So we wanted this person to actually bring in techniques and ideas from outside the library. It was hard because he was introducing them to things like code reviews, where suddenly, they're feeling like what they're doing is being put under scrutiny. But he had the right personality. He's a very humble, very gentle person. So he was very able to introduce this in a non-threatening way. And I think after the initial fear of I don't want to show my code, I don't want to expose it because what if it's not well formed, people got over that and they started realizing that through regular code reviews their own skills could actually develop and get better. And it's been wonderful because now this has gone sort of leaked into other areas, so we now have staff in our resource management and also in our copy cataloging sections using Jira to manage projects that they're working on and trying to fit their project management into an agile development cycles that match the cycles of the other technologists. So it's difficult, but it's also rewarding once you start seeing the results.
I think the biggest thing I've seen with essentially with disruptive hires kind of throughout Cornell University Library, but the ones that I've had the most experience with, in particular, some of our staff that we've really found willing to kind of step outside of think outside the box and question processes and out-of-date norms that we've got. And not just question them, but offer new ideas, like here's a better way, can we do this? As we've kind of rewarded that with yes, let's do it, make it happen as well, this has can become a little contagious. Like other people say, oh, well, I've had this thought all the time of doing this other thing. And we can sort of spread some of that disruption around. For better or worse, it makes more disruptors in the whole workplace.
Okay, thank you. So you're first now. How do you provide support and make the position attractive to these hires for retention? And we're probably gonna stick with this as the last question, then we're gonna have time for questions.
Well, that's a hard one. We don't always suddenly have money at our disposal, and money tends to be the easiest way to reward someone for just about anything. But when we can, particularly with sort of internal people that we really want to be pointing at some of that stuff that's really going to channel their drive and their interest in disrupting things, that does need to be coupled often with, like, here's a pay band increase, or here's a pay increase, or here's some freedom to kind of work on this on your own, maybe a little less direct supervision, whatever it might be, that can either sort of free them up or make them feel appreciated. I think pay tends to be the easiest one. That's also where we tend to lose the ability to get some particular disruptors, say out of industry or something like that, because libraries aren't known for their massive pay scale. I don't know about yours, anyway. But just trying to find ways to do that and building a sort of progressive structure for not just librarians who have kind of a promotion scheme they can work through, but for those other staff, sometimes when possible, a way to see themselves advancing in the organization, even if it's kind of working on the same sorts of things, but as they have these successes, trying to build on that and give them a better job, essentially.
For us, there are two things that we've been doing, especially when you're talking about highly skilled technology people. Obviously, New York has a high cost of living. We can't possibly compete with some of the salaries that are being offered in Wall Street. So one of the things that we do is we try to offer a better quality of life, lesser working hours, more ability to work from home. That has been one area that we've had good success with. I think another area is we are looking at introducing these similar types of jobs, but at a much lower introductory level. So you're taking students who maybe have studied computer science, they're graduating, they've never really had a chance to work on large data sets or large systems. We certainly have a large data set and a large system, and they're willing to come and work for us for a couple years to get experience, to build their portfolio, to build their knowledge, and then we're also, hiring, knowing that this person may very well in a short time choose to move on, and that's fine. Because we just feel like we've played a part of extending their education into the real world.
So I have two thoughts on this. One has to do with motivation. Obviously, money is a big part of that. I think it'd be silly to say otherwise, but and I also believe that the libraries tend to have a better sort of work-life balance aspect as well, but I think it's really good to understand what somebody's motivation is, and as to why they were interested in working in the library in the first place, and to really try to leverage that as much as possible. Could be opportunities for career advancement. I think it's fine to get somebody who's ambitious and to work with them on how they can actually realize that potential. But that also means that you have to support their personal and career growth just as much as the business needs of the organization as well. So there are dollars associated with that, but usually it's something that might be a little more sustainable from the aspect of one-time funding. And in finding out their motivation, support it if you can. It could be all sorts of things: money, benefits, travel, influence, career stability, location, organizational flexibility. Knowing this motivation, in my mind, is really one of the most key pieces to retention. And I'm glad that Jesse has been bringing up about sort of within. In two cases, I've had people who started in one part of the organization and ended up in very, very different jobs. And part of that was seeing that potential, having them in a sense sort of see that potential as well, but also understanding what were their interests and working to get them to that. In both cases, it involved moving them into completely different departments. That's not something that happens quickly in any organization, but I think that if you're willing to become their biggest advocate for where it is that they would like to see themselves, especially for people who are already working in your organization, that in and of itself is a very disruptive way of introducing change from your existing talent, which I think is something that we all should keep in mind as well.
I think we are talking about similar, things. So disruptive hiring is sometimes is a challenge or dangerous for the libraries, but also the person who applied for the job. It is really challenging, and the person doesn't know about this new job, but really the motivation is stronger in a way than other non-disruptive hiring, so to speak. So in my case, I try to encourage them, even though maybe inside my mind, I was worrying about whether this person is going to do well or not, but I never expressed it openly, just I watched him and tried to encourage him. And also maybe this is also my kind of management style, but whichever cat, whether it's a white cat or black cat, whoever caught the mice is the good cat. So that's what I try to tell my staff members, just giving them the goal that we have to reach, and then they will find a way. So I will give them the flexibility of doing their own ways, and just trust them once you hire them. Even though there's maybe 5% of my mind, I'm still a bit uncertain, but still show 100% trust to the person.
Okay, your turn. So disrupt our meeting and ask us crazy questions.
You're it. I'm kidding. I'll dive right in. I work at a pretty small college and outside of Baltimore, and my question for you is, let's turn this on its head. What kind of pushback have you gotten internally? You want to disrupt, but you're also disrupting. So do you get pushback from HR on rewriting job descriptions? Do you get pushback from your higher level administration on saying, I really want to hire somebody outside of this zone? What kind of reactions do you deal with?
I can talk about that. At NYU, the librarians are members of the faculty, and when we first began discussing having a larger profile of professional staff who are non-faculty in technical services, the immediate pushback was that we were deprofessionalizing cataloging, we were deprofessionalizing the librarian profession. It didn't quite make sense because the people we were hiring were in fact recognized as professionals by the university. But you will get that, and you need to really begin talking to people about what your motives are, why this will benefit the library, and the mission, ultimately the mission of the university.
Yeah, I would think just a couple with that is that when you're hiring, you're trying to meet some sort of a business need. In a sense, the job description is your articulation of what that is, or at least sort of a hazy understanding of that. And I think that in a sense, regardless of the pushback, as long as those two things match up and it's defensible, I think you just have to have the courage to sort of stick to your guns and to listen and to change your mind. And to change pathways if necessary based on the feedback you're getting. But at the same time, I think as long as it's staying true to the mission and the job description is staying true to that as well, I think it puts you in a really good place for sort of sticking to your guns.
I'll just add to this. This is really hard to do. So it's a great question. We struggle to convince as we are, that we need more people. So once it gets to, disruption, you need to kind of maybe project it, say this is really what this person is going to do, and have, stability around the success. So measurable success, and but then we are also senior administrators. I don't think it's an easy thing to do for a unit head. So it does require a cloud administration that says that you know what you're doing. So, yeah. Okay, next question. Thank
Well,
you.
I got just one quick thing to add to that, which is I've found that success in these hires helps make the next one easier. Like they can, like, hey, we described this way and it worked. Here's this new idea we've got, and here's the business case we have to make it happen. It can build on itself, at least until administrations change or whatever happens that you may not have control over.
So I really appreciate the panel and being able to think thoughtfully about how we change the culture. But can you talk about some of the work that needs to be done prior to the disruption? I think I'm hearing some of that. So that's one question. The other one is, how do you describe or see some of those characteristics of those soft skills within your candidate pool? So one about the climate and one about the soft skills and how that's demonstrated. Thank you.
On the soft skills part, I'll answer first, which is Cornell University for a long time has had this chart called the Skills for Success, which is essentially putting like a soft skill chart on every job description where we can kind of highlight some of those. And often in our hiring decisions, those are some of the things that we're sort of giving people points for or against in the interview process, in addition to like, did we check the boxes of they know how to do X, Y, and Z, or they are trainable on this other thing, but how do they interact with people? How do they, are they good stewards of private information or of money or whatever it might be? In many cases, a disruptive hire, we're looking for some aspects of those soft skills. But the university sort of has this stamped for approval list of these skills for success that we can work with. And I don't want to take all the time, so if somebody else wants to jump in.
So creating a background for the disruptive hiring, in my case, was in a way easy because the staff members were, same faces for 20 years. They want to see somebody new. So it wasn't, I don't know, that was the reason, but there wasn't any big effort in my side to create the environment for that. But then for the hiring process, during the search process, I try to get involved all the staff members who will interact with this person. So we maybe select the finalists for the interviews, and doing that, we will, through the phone interview, we can find some other good qualities. But then, leaving it to the staff members and see how the candidate, react or interact well with other staff members, that has a lot of future success, whether this person is capable of doing it or not.
Thank you. Great panel. You mentioned how libraries have their own vocabulary. We have our jargon. In one disruptive hire I made, once the person started, we realized that in the job description and in the interview process, words that we had used that we knew what they meant in our library context, they had nodded because they thought they knew what they meant, but not in the same context. How do you work on your language in the job descriptions and during the interview process to try and get things across to someone who may not have the same context?
Boy, this is really near and dear. Once again, being new right now and getting a lot of acronyms that are kind of like what I was used to, but not exactly the same, and also learning about things which weren't part of my responsibilities. I guess the point is that there's no way. It's hopeless, so don't worry about it. There's a lot of sense making that happens when somebody is new, and you just need to give them the ability to do that. And no matter what your best intentions are, there is going to be a disconnect between what they think they're getting into and what they're getting into. I doubt any of us have ever gone into a new job and said, "Yep, that's exactly what I thought it was." It's just, I'm not saying don't not care, but I don't feel too bad that that there's confusion unless it's, I don't know, unless somebody died. I guess that's a really bad reason, but for a doctor, I'm sorry, I need to stop talking.
I've got just one thing. One key thing I think is spell out acronyms. And if you are purposely trying to find someone from outside this this small sector that we all live and work in, try to describe that well, whether it's in the job description or the first half hour to an hour that the hiring supervisor is meeting with them, really talk about what it is you're hoping they're going to get into. But then none of it's going to be perfect, and I still get surprised by what my job is supposed to be.
Brown, just recently we created this website for new employees because it wasn't just for disruptive new people or whatever. We just thought that it's part of the recruitment process to have as transparent process going out. It's available publicly. What are you expecting in the first few weeks, days, months? And this is also where we tried to kind of, explain all the acronyms. We have this, Excel sheet with all the acronyms, what they mean. But I also, I resonate with, what Brad was just saying. It's really hard to get into a library culture. And every time that we switch a culture, it's going to take a while. But yeah, if anyone has a good idea, tell us what it is.
So one quick story and one question. So the quick story is recently for a grant, we hired a non-cataloger, non-librarian to design a cataloging linked data workflow, and she's the most popular person in the project. So it can be a great success. The question really has to do with salary. So it's come up a couple of times. And I think especially for us, we all understand there's, in Silicon Valley, tech people get paid a lot more than at the university. But I guess my question has to do within the university. So within the library, our IT people get paid a lot more because they're not classified as librarians. So often our disruptive hires are bringing technology people into something like collections or technical services, and they're hired as librarians, and they can do the same job. So it's either one of two questions. Either we're not paying them as much as the IT people who do the same job, or we pay them more and they're getting paid more than librarians at the same rank who aren't doing IT work. So I guess experiences you've had just with that sort of disparity between, even within libraries, about salary ranges for tech people versus non-tech people.
When we post, we don't hire technical people as librarians. They're hired as technologists. They are on the same university pay scale as other technologists. So the university has the library has our own HR. We create the job descriptions, but then it goes to library central HR and compensation office, and so they will say, oh, this position is doing similar work to this other position at another department. So we don't have the problem there. We do at times have the problem that the price of a younger librarian versus a younger technologist, the technologist is in fact going to make more money than the librarian.
For the salary, actually, I don't have a clear answer because library, we have a limited resources, or even our regulations doesn't allow paying a lot more than what that same level of staff members being paid. But another thing we can offer is that the different types of lifestyle or the benefits that library can provide compared to outside the library works. For example, you don't have to travel every week for the sales travel, or your job is in a way much more secure, or the stabilities than other jobs. Those things maybe you can offer, counterbalance the low salaries, if I can say.
The only thing I would add to that is that, in a sense, when you bring people in at a higher rate of pay, at some point you end up with a calibration exercise that occurs, which sometimes brings people up also. And I've seen that happen. And for that reason, it sort of makes me happy. But I also, that was at a private institution where I think it was a little easier. I will admit my perspective on this is a lot different now that I'm in state school, in which the dollars are not quite that so freewheeling in a sense. So it's a conundrum, but I think that it does introduce friction. And sometimes salaries are very open, and you have to be prepared for people to be able to know that information and to think what they're going to think about that. And that's a courageous act, if anything, having to answer that question because it'll get asked.
So we kind of ran out of time, but we're happy to continue. Up to you.
Well,
Yes.
I was just curious, how do you encourage existing employees to be disruptive hires?
That's a good one.
Some of them are disruptive by nature. No one in this room, maybe. That's part of it. I mean, I think electronic resource troubleshooting, like figuring out why something's not working, answering whatever questions are coming into these lists, whether it's from a reference librarian or a user, takes, I find, a disruptive skill set. It's work we're having mostly non-librarians handle, but it requires, like, things can come in from left field all the time. And that's an area I think we've found staff that we think have kind of the right mix of skill set and interest, and kind of they're okay with just sort of diving in, not really having a clear direction until they start to weave into what the problem is. And as we sort of find those people and get them trained up, they tend to also become a little more disruptor for some of our other work as well. Like, well, this problem made me think we screwed up back here loading this batch of records, and can we change how the links are going to work or something like that. And that's what we want. Like, so we spot people that have kind of that broad skill set and really just a willingness to kind of dive into some unknown turf and try to make good use of that and point them at things they'll find interesting.
I think from my perspective, what we try to do is to bring people together around the disruptive hire, which is basically to create a disruptive community by dialogue. And that's, so if we are lucky to get people that think differently about workflows or about the work, we want them to talk about what they think and meet experts as much as possible to continue and kind of investigate together. So what we do is, we meet, like I'm thinking about the managers group we meet once a week, and we talk for an hour and a half about different things, coming from different perspectives, and the expectation is that we know how to respectfully negate each other. If something's not, doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. So we find the mouse together. But yeah, so it takes a little village to support such an effort. And also the belief that you continue to support it over time. So last question.
Thank you for this panel. It was really fascinating. The four of you all talked about successfully hiring disruptors at your libraries, but I'm wondering, how do you define success, actually? You've given a few concrete examples of, some disruption to the culture, but I'm wondering if you can talk more about, is that how you're defining success? And also, are these disruptors actually really doing any more disruption than any of your typical hires? Are you actually seeing like a huge impact after hiring these folks?
For my one concrete person, there were a lot of demonstrable things. She was, I know this sounds really silly, but she was able to get a person who had an odd schedule to finally have a conforming schedule that nobody had actually accomplished in 25 years. that was a huge success. So that seems like an odd thing, but I mean, it's sort of this fearless nature of the individual and how, and the types of things that they tackled and what they were to accomplish in a really short period of time was something that I don't think I would have gotten if I had gotten somebody who had sort of approached it from a very traditional way of looking at it. So it's sort of like, I had, what the last question was, why do it in the first place? And but I think that we're asking for to take a shock to the system, a giant leap in advancement, and that we're taking a risk that might reap the benefits or it may take a hit. But at the same time, it's not looking for perfection or what looks like an after-school special, amazing epiphany moment, but even if you're just incrementally moving your culture down a path that enables us to deal better with an environment that we're operating that is accelerating at a rapid pace, it's just helping us sort of stem the tide more than anything. So it's hard to say more that, my concrete example of a work schedule and having a high output in a really short period of time, I saw those as demonstrable benefits. Were they, earth-shattering? No, but they still made a difference.
I think it totally makes a difference, and it's really worth it. And maybe it is about the project management. So we are hiring for a specific need, and it's easier to kind of, be successful when the need is met with that particular hire. And then the question is, what do you do next? And that's when, the village needs to come in and suggest new projects to work on. Another time we'll talk about sustaining a disruptive community. That's actually really hard. And if you are good at what we're all talking about, you hope that you can manage it. I think we're not necessarily coached to do that in our own organizations, how to kind of keep on that energy. This is something that, we'll need to work on for next time. Thank you for being here. Thanks for the panel. It's really interesting. Thanks.